How Mitakiapi, and thank you so much, Miss Juliana, for saying yes, because I was waiting for a cue. How Mitakiapi Chante, Washte Nape Zapalo. Hello, my relatives. I greet you with a good heart and a hearty handshake. Chante Tatanka Wajila Imachiapi. My Lakota name is Wonbo. My American name is Joseph McNeil Jr. I'm the general manager of the Sage Development Authority. We are working on the wind farm for the Standing Rock Sioux Tribe. It's my pleasure to welcome you to today's Anpetu Wi Dialogue. We're talking about protecting sacred sites. I'm also very thankful for my panelists because they're my neighbors and my coworkers here at the tribe and here at home. And I'll give them, I'll say the name and then, they can introduce themselves. But just a few. We have Jeremy Freeman. He's representing John Eagle from THPO. We also have Fawn Washizi. She's the chairman of the Sage Development Authority, our board. And then also we have the very talented, but I would say the diligent Joe Smith. He steers the ship at Land Operations. So we'll start with Joe Smith. Would you give folks an introduction? And then we'll move on. Yep, but hit your mute button first because you got a good start there.
Hello, Joseph Smith, Director of Land Management for the Standing Rock Sioux Tribe. I have worked for the tribe for about 20 years, been director for about 12 years, and happy to be here today and talk about our project and the work that the tribe and land management has done to get it going.
Thank you, Joe. I appreciate that. Yeah, it's definitely the work from Land Management Office did a lot of the groundwork. Joe Smith, and then next up is Fawn Washizi. She used to work with Joe Smith in land management. Fawn, you have the mic.
Good afternoon, everyone. Chante Washte Nape Chiuzapi. Yeah, my American name is Fawn Washizi. My Lakota name is Shunhizi Oda Agliwi, which means she brings many buckskin horses. I'm a lifelong resident of Fort Yates, or the Long Soldier community on Standing Rock. Yeah, like Joe said, I worked for about 10 years with Joe Smith over at Land Management, and I'm very proud of the work that we did there. And for the past couple of years here, I've been a 5th and 6th grade math teacher and just kind of kept in contact through the Sage Development Authority. So yeah, thank you guys. Thanks everyone for attending.
Yep. Thank you, Ms. Fawn. And then next up, representing THPO, which THPO represents Tribal Historic Preservation Office. The Tribal Historic Preservation Office institutes Section 106 of the NEPA and also Title 32, the Cultural Resource Code for the Standing Rock Sioux Tribe. And representing THPO today is our fearless Jeremy Freeman, the archaeologist for THPO. Jeremy, you have the mic.
Thanks, Joe. My name is Jeremy Freeman. I'm the archaeologist working for the THPO department here at the tribe. I've been working in this capacity since December of 2018, and still, I feel like sometimes I still am learning how to do my job, but it's been it's been very busy since we've been here. I don't know if I can do as much justice to this as John does. He's the THPO officer, and I take a lot of guidance from him, and here to support all the projects that we have in regards to ensuring compliance with Section 106 and with the Title 32 of the Tribal Historic Preservation Code.
Thank you, Jeremy. I have to say to everybody that's joined us today, these three people have been instrumental, institutional pillars of facilitating this project. Without their work, we wouldn't be where we are today. So I'm very happy to have them on. I'm very honored and respect their time, and I want to thank everyone for being on the panel today to talk about particularly what we have as one of the major tenets of not just our wind farm, but as the tribe, is protecting sacred sites and what they mean to us. So Jeremy, I would ask you to give a description, of that definition and from your from your heart. John would do it in his own way, so you will do it in your own way, and we'll carry on from there.
Yeah. So I mean, as far as sacred sites, there, as an archaeologist, of course, I'm interested in identifying, what we are defined within the CFR 36 CFR 800 as historic properties, and these are sites that are considered eligible for listing on the National Register of Historic Places. And certainly sacred sites, fall into that rubrics. And part of my research is just I've been doing archaeology for a little over 20 years, and I specialize particularly in rock art research, and I'm really interested actually in sacred sites, and many of these sites they kind of transcend both the both the pragmatic but also the sacredness as well, and certainly are worthy of preservation. And how these of course these sites have meanings beyond just being historic properties, and they certainly have meanings, and they're defined as such within the CFR codes, where tribes have the role of identifying sites of religious and cultural significance, and what what's considered to be significant in that sense. And so that's a large part of what we do is defining identifying what sites these are, where they're located in the landscape. And they can be sacred for any number of reasons. They can be they might be burials, they might be commemoration places, they may be places where ceremonies taking place. They could be a variety of different things, but they all ultimately retain some sort of sacredness to them. So it doesn't necessarily that the term, I think, sacred tends to encompass a broad range of different types of sites that we ultimately have within our I guess our radar as far as trying to identify and trying to protect when different projects are proposed that may ultimately have an impact on them.
I appreciate that answer, and it's important to have that particular viewpoint, of the procedural process of what that means, as far as like standard regulations, and then also in the law. Fawn, from your discussions or from your point of view, we had Section 106, Title 32 training, with Tim Mance and NEPA, THPOs around the country, owe their existence basically, to Tim Mintz when he came to make this a regulatory thing through NAGPRA, National Native American Graves Repatriation Act, to preserve, cultural sites. From your point of view, Ms. Fawn, what does that mean to you, sacred sites, and why are they important to preserve?
When I first started, it was my job to nominate individuals for our board. And one thing that I wanted that holds really dear to me is protection of sacred sites. So when I asked people to sit on the board, and I said, I'm going to nominate you, I said, there's, that is number one for us with this Power Authority board, the Sage Power Authority. And I said, because we learned from development with the DAPL and the No DAPL movement, we lost a lot of sacred sites through, not having EIS completed before basically ground was broken. So I thought that needed to be core to our values for our board was, we got to put that number one. We're not going to swerve. We're not going to, make any adjustments to that. Number one is we will not harm any sacred sites. And the reason I did that is because that's all we have. That's what connects us as Native Indigenous people to the land, to our spirituality, to our religion. And the way we communicate with our relatives that have moved on, and that sense of spirituality is that connection to the earth that we have in those sites that we still have on the earth. And that's why it's very important. I mean, there cannot be any movement of those, you know, we need to make sure we set up buffering zones and all that if we want to develop, because it's just there's no compromise basically. So
Right. Oh, thank you for that. Just as an update to everyone that's out there, we were in a place where we had almost all of our sites done, you know, and then the relevance of the sacred sites that we had found along the ridge lines. My board knows this, everybody that's on call knows this, but you know, just as an update, the importance of everything that was found out there is qualifying this to be a district, it's called. And in that district, it needs to be protected. So to our core tenant, you know, we are readjusting turbines that were located in that area. So we're in the process of relocating a significant amount of turbines. And that's what we said we would do from jump. So I'm very proud of us and, you know, of you, Madam Chair, to have the foresight to, you know, select folks who are going to protect that, you know, particular aspect of our culture. Because without that, like you said, some aspects of having visions and dreams and having communication outside of what we do verbally or what we do written or even, you know, electronically like this really revolve your heart and your soul and how you reach out to those who yet to come and those who left before you for assistance. And that's that realm we live in as Lakota. Whether we realize it or not, we're always connected. And that's one of the beauties, I think, of being who we are. And it's really a gift. But going back to the project too, the process of finding a sacred site and moving a project or utilizing the land, a lot of that falls in land operations category. And there's a relationship between land operations and THPO as far as when a person wants to build something on land or wants to use it for ranching or wants to build a home or wants to put a pathway through or anything of the sort like that. Joe Smith, could you talk to the folks out here about how land operations and THPO work together to move projects or to work on projects and how that is evolved, and particularly with this wind project?
I think you just did that, so I'm good now.
How do you say that?
Yeah, we, I mean, any activity that people want to complete on the lands here, you know, and involving turning it over the soil essentially is we've always have to consider working with THPO on that, and it's always one of the first considerations. And I know in the past, I think I've heard there's very little percentage of the reservation had been lands hadn't been looked at by THPO, and I think, you know, this project here, we're aware of areas where there was significant features or sites out there, but also gave us the opportunity for them to find and you know, identify what's out there. So you know, it's benefit to find them, benefit to protect them, and you know, and with you know, use of the land, you know, we have water lines that are put in for livestock, water lines that were put in for homes, dams dug for livestock out on the rangeland. You know, THPO has always been a part of that and being able to look at those sites. You know, if there's any out there, to identify them. And at the same time, a lot of these projects are, you know, allowed to be completed. And working with them on this one here, it's pretty significant. And I think in finding out what's out there for, for THPO and identifying and having a record of it.
Mhm. Thank you, Joe. You've been involved, your department has been involved with this wind project far beyond I ever got. And you and Fawn are like, let's say the master and co-master, the co-conspirators of helping get this project moving. How did this start with land operations? Did you guys get handed the project, and when the tribe, did they say, we want to do a wind farm, Joe Smith? How are you going to get this done? How did that occur within land ops as an origin point?
It started with grants that were the tribe received for just looking at what can be developed here. And I think I'll let Fawn start talking about those, because she done a number of grants to get this thing started. And then when she left, I had to pick it up. So I learned a lot from her and the work that she had done prior.
Mm-hmm.
Geez, I can't really speak to when we originally started. I would say it would be in the early 2000s when Standing Rock Sioux Tribe itself started working towards renewable energy. And that would be with a gentleman named Mark Whitebull. I think he did some smaller grants just to see, if we could put up individual turbines onto individual buildings and to offset some energy, stuff like that, and some energy usage studies. But what kind of got the ball rolling overall was in the mid 2000s, Joe McNeil and you and Dave Archambault II were both on council at that time. And Dave is on our board as well. And they kept getting approached by all these developers basically saying, there's great wind on Standing Rock, because this is, I believe in 2004, the new wind energy NREL, National Renewable Energy Laboratory maps came out.
Right.
So then all these developers saw this potential that Standing Rock had in North Dakota, the Dakotas had, and they just start bombarding the tribe. We want to develop. And Dave really explains this really well. And I can't remember, they kept explaining to the tribe a flip model. Can't remember exactly what it's called. It's like Mississippi flip or something like that. I don't know if you know it, Joel, but basically what they were proposing was, okay, we'll totally pay for the wind farm. And all you have to do is put up your land and basically be land leasers. And then when we earn our money back in 30 to 40 years, you can have the wind farm. But thankfully, our tribal council at the time could foresee what would happen. 30, 40 years down the road, we have broken down wind turbines, wind farms, and we have no money to repair those or to upgrade them, or no money to rehab the land. So thankfully at that time, they did not sign on for any of those agreements. And so basically the Department of Energy Office of Indian Energy was contacted, and that office pretty much started because Native tribes were getting contacted and they needed help, and they needed kind of to figure out and educate themselves on, okay, how can we develop on our own land? And so they start releasing all these grants. And the first grant that the tribe got was to create the office. And it was an office created, I can't even remember anymore, Joe, Office of Renewable Energy, something at Standing Rock Sioux Tribe. It was under Joe's land management program anyways. And it was basically an office of one, which was me. And my goal was basically to just keep getting grants and figuring out, okay, we want to do renewable energy. What type of renewable energy can be developed on Standing Rock? And, is it feasible? So we start getting snowball effect. I think we got over since I was in there from like 2010, maybe a handful, 5 or 6 grants, including some gravel grants, some like mining stuff, and some renewable and feasibility studies, basically. And basically what we were trying to do was, let's get as much information as we can so that when we do make the jump to actually building a wind farm or a solar farm, anything like that, we have invested information into our own project, which will, in the end game, will give us basically more ownership in our own project. So we won't be owning the project in 30, 40 years. We'll own it sooner, hopefully 10 years or less. So that was the overall goal, was let's keep getting these grants, do these feasibility studies, get as much information as we can.
I would say you're pretty successful in that charge when you were in that position, because that's the whole reason for what we're doing with Sage Development Authority now, is the pre-development. So the pre-development, is our equity piece.
We looked at different sites, try to find where the transmission was lying. Joel was great with, helping us figure out where the land issues that were out there. We weren't able to do any of the THBO studies at the time because we kind of had to like narrow down the sites themselves.
Mhm.
But yeah, it was kind of like a snowball effect leading into what we now have as Sage Power Authority.
Good job. I have to say that because I work here. No, you're my boss. No, I'm kidding. Seriously, I got to thank you, because it was all good work, and everybody here, did good work to get us to this point. And, everybody on the call is supporting the project, and helping us have more ownership by donating or, giving other time, thoughts, ideas, and, helping us build our equity pieces into this project as we move forward, but going back to, and thank you for all that. And going back to sacred sites too, there's a process for this. When one is found, we talked a little bit about what they mean to us culturally. There's a long history that anyone who's really interested in this can. There's a United Tribes Technical College. Tim Mintz did a talk on their YouTube series. I forget what it's called, but he talks about sacred sites like before White Buffalo Calf Maiden came with the pipe. What types of sites were being used? And these were connection points, spiritual connection points by religious leaders at that time. And everybody had their role, and they had their medicine, they had their vision. They went and pursued their vision, because you have a role to play, you have things to you, people to heal, and you're part of the community. So everybody was responsible, back then, before Washichus came and all this. And these sites were critical because people would go back to that, or camp next to those, or come close proximity to these sites seasonally, so that prayers could be made and help could be had for the people to live. And that connection from those yet to come and those that left was always reignited or rekindled on a daily basis, and then on a seasonal basis. So, listening to what Tim had talked about in reference to what these sacred sites meant previously, and even now, that when folks from THPO go out and survey an area, they'll come across a feeling first. In some places, it'll be a feeling that they can't go further, and or they walk into something and have to back out of it because there's a very intense feeling, which means there's a power there. There's a sacred power there, that something is here. And so they'll take a look, and then they'll see what type of formation the rocks were made into. And those rocks were made into certain images and or shapes that have significant meaning, and have significant types of prayer. And his explanation during these talks was that when someone has a vision, might be one of our children or grandchildren, gets a call, has a vision, has a dream, and that they're to go to a certain place. and throughout their lives, they're going to get to that place. And when they do, it's important for those sites to still be there because there's that connection to the earth from the land to the spirit world, that there's that communication. So our ability to um, be whole as Lakota is important for us because we're not just physical beings, we're spiritual beings. And we live in these bodies, in relation to the earth, in relation to our relatives, all the beings and creatures that we live with. So it's a wonderful talk. And I had asked folks at United Tribes, my wife, basically, she works there as a CTE director. Can we get access to that? And I think anybody on the call, get a hold of United Tribes, get a hold of Russ McDonald, he's the president, and say, release this information so that people can at least go to United Tribes website and take a look at it, because it's important. So that's just my 2 cents on adding, to what sacred sites had meant, particularly from Tim's presentation. And so when we find sacred sites, Jeremy, when THPO finds sacred sites, what happens once that site's identified? Could you take us through the process of how we protect them as THPO?
Certainly. So, as far as the identification process, since I'm not Lakota or Native, I don't necessarily have that same connection. So I rely heavily on our staff. We have probably about 15 staff members that work for us. We their role, their title is a traditional cultural specialist, and these are enrolled members of Standing Rock who have been trained, but also have cultural affiliation with the land. And I rely heavily on their expertise as we're moving across the land and identifying things. And I have kind of a vague notion of what to look for. So what I'll generally do is I'll call one of them over and get a second, third, fourth opinion if necessary, as many as necessary, and see what they think. And I'm definitely indebted to their hard work, here with the work that we do. So I like I said, rely on them heavily. And so what we do is the methodology we use for this particular project. There's a standard methodology that we utilize in the field, but this particular one, the scale of it was such that it required a slightly different approach, because we certainly couldn't cover the entire area. It's such a massive area. So we borrowed the methodology from other wind farm projects in which we've at least been tertiarily involved, and not only do we do class 3 surveys here at Standing Rock, but we will send our staff, our traditional cultural specialists. We usually just abbreviate to TCS because it's a mouthful, but we send them the projects all over the ancestral lands. And many of these are actually wind farm projects. Next year is one of the biggest producers of the developers of these projects. And we actually were really kind of inculcated in their type of particular methodology, where they that we felt was going to be best suited for this scale of project. And typically what they do is they do what we would archaeologically refer to as a class 2 reconnaissance. They often refer to it as microsighting. And so we've been using some of the same terminology that they've used as well. And what that is going out to actual turbines, because the turbines are what really drive this project, which are selected, of course, based on wind speeds and things that have already been calculated. And so what we do is we target those particular areas, because that configuration may change, as it certainly has. It's gone through several incarnations during this project, and look to see if those are feasible locations, to see if there are any sacred sites, within a particular parameter. We first started out looking at a 250 foot, I think it was 250 foot diameter radius of the turbines. We expanded that to 750 feet. based on what we were finding and what we thought the particular needs of this project were. That was to give us a little bit of flexibility.
Also, Jeremy, we were concerned that if one of these things fell, would it fall on one of the sacred sites? So yeah, we had to consider, the radius in that context, because we want to make sure to avoid in all capacity, damaging or altering sacred sites. Yeah.
Yeah, and those are things that I could consider too. And those in our discussions, that was something we were concerned with. Because it's not just the actual construction that has an impact on sites like this. It has to, you have to take into account the infrastructure that goes to support it. You have to think about what happens in the worst case scenario if because there are extremely strong winds on some of those areas. So what happens if a turbine does actually topple? We have to think, I think, somewhat fourth dimensionally, to quote Dr. Emmett Brown. But to think, what would happen if one of these turbines would actually fall? We certainly need to be mindful of the impacts that could incur as a result of the built environment after it's constructed. And so that was one of our considerations as well. So we wanted to think about the entirety of it. And other things to consider too are our view shed. What is the impact? What kind of impact is this going to have on sacred sites as far as the view? Is it going to impede that? And is that part of the what constitutes its eligibility, or is it a contributing element of integrity as far as looking at the eligibility of these sites? And so these are all things that we essentially had to consider. And so what we did is, and I haven't actually been, unfortunately, I don't necessarily have the luxury to dedicate all my time to this particular project, but since I have staff available, we have tasked one of our TCSs with working really, has done the lion's share really of the survey work. He's one of our most experienced TCSs, has been doing it for years, and so I would kind of walk him through what we needed. I produced the polys, drop them on our GPS unit, and send them on. Ask him to take polygons using our GPS. He would return with the data. We'd download it. We'd take a look at it, and look at what we need to do as far as shifting, making recommendations, and things of this sort. And then what I generally do, I print off maps, and then we talk it over. We have these discussions. We have a conference table here in our office, and sit down with John, the THPO officer, our director, and think about, what does this mean? What's the next step, as far as proceeding it? What are our recommendations, and what do we need to do to protect the site, but also, hopefully being able to enable this project to go forward, and accomplishing both tasks.
So in this project and any project, when something is found, the recommendation is given back to the people that are looking to do the project one way or another, whether that is to proceed or not proceed. How does that conversation usually go?
Well, that's, it really depends on the nature of what we find, the nature of the terrain, and a variety of things, the significance of the sites. In this particular case, we just started finding, and as Joe Smith, as you alluded to earlier, we have very little coverage. There's I think 2 million acres with a standing rock. I would estimate, just off the top of my head, we probably have less than 1% of it actually covered. Most of it was Section 106 driven. Although I only know what we have in our GIS database, but we ultimately we have very little coverage, and there's never been any surveys in this particular area. So, a lot of times we kind of fly in blind. We don't really necessarily know what we're going to find. It may be we have a project, and frankly, sometimes these are easiest that we don't have anything of concern in an APE, and sometimes we might have a very dense concentration of sites, and that just ended up being the case here. As a very significant landform. That landform itself is a sacred site. Really, in the entirety, there was a reason that people were drawn back to that. And Joe McNeil, you made reference to that is revisiting sites. These are, like you said, they're spiritual inflection points that were significant enough for people to return to year after year, re-energize, reutilize in some way, building on these. These are to use an archaeological term, is what we call multi-component sites, but in a kind of more layman's terms, they're multi-generational, where they're returning these sites for various reasons. It's clear from what we were finding that this was the case with many of these sites. Some of them very unique features, some of them very complex, and it's really interesting, the diversity of types of sites. So my experience so far, with the sites that we've identified, they're usually fairly consistent, but up on this particular ridge, there's a diversity of different types of sites. So it was being utilized in various different ways as well.
Well, talk about that, Jeremy. It piqued my interest. There's different types of sites. So what are the different types we're talking about? Oh, and it's not an invitation for people to go up and try and take a look, because we're protecting these. I want to say that right off the bat. These are things that I had in mind when I was talking about this project with John and Jeremy. I was like, okay, great. I want to get up there with a drone and I want to, record this for history and da-da-da-da. And THPO was like, no, you're not recording this. And, I had to learn, there's that level of respect has to be protected, for these sites to maintain existence for generations to come, and that's what's really important. So I guess when we're talking about types of sites, is there any kind of illumination you can give us there, or is that not something we should talk about?
Yeah, I mean, I can give kind of a general characterization, of the sites. I mean, the majority of them are what we find, rather somewhat ubiquitously around Standing Rock. The stone feature sites. These are what we refer to as petroforms. So they're rock arrangements, alignments, effigies, cairns, things of that sort. There was one we thought was possibly an eagle catch site, related to that particular ceremony. There was a petroglyph site that was identified as well. And there aren't actually very many of those, as far as I know, at least recorded in our geodatabase. We don't have many petroglyph sites, so those, I think, possibly adds to. There's like a handful of them here, and that probably really adds to the significance of that site and being utilized conceptually in different ways. I don't know exactly what that means, but it's clear that it was conceptually being used in different ways, and that it had different these different inflections, spiritual inflections for different purposes and uses.
You thought you didn't have a lot to add to this conversation earlier. I knew otherwise. You said a couple of things I want to touch on. What's a poly? Just briefly.
Oh, sure. So a poly is it's, and I actually have the GPS here. So we use this. This is it's a Trimble Geo XH. Fortunately, the archaeologist here before me I was fortunate that they used some grant money to obtain that, because we use it quite a bit. But a poly is we use this to create a boundary around the site. So what we do with those boundaries is we can download those into our GIS, and then we can plot them in a spatial reference to one another, so that we can look at a map, look at our GIS to better understand where things are located in relation to one another, and also where they're located in relation to the proposed project. In this case, it might be where they're located in relation to a turbine location. And what we did with those turbine locations initially, I just used GIS to create a buffer. So create a 750-foot buffer around it. And what we did is we surveyed that entire buffer, and then use the GPS to record the boundaries of the sites within those buffers. And we were able to overlay those with that data, and then better take a look at it in spatial reference, because it can be very challenging to do that while you're on the ground. But as you aggregate the data into your GIS, it makes it a little easier for planning purposes.
Cool. And then APE area, is that area of probable effect?
The area of potential effect.
Potential effect. Okay. And then a Karen. What's a Karen?
A cairn, I mean, by definition, it's just a aggregation of rocks, like a cluster of rocks. So we typically are use it to refer to burials in particular, but in a broadest sense, it's really just a cluster of rocks.
Cool. I appreciate that. There was some things that you were mentioning there, and I was like, if you're not involved in these conversations, you're like, what are these words? What are you saying here?
John actually calls me out a lot because and sometimes I've been doing this so long that I use archeo terminology so much that it makes sense in my head and terminologically, and I forget that it's not necessarily part of the general conversations I have outside of my discipline. So
that's good. We're all archeo educated a little bit better today. I think. We have a couple questions. One came in from the audience. They're asking, do we work or plan on building with tourism, building sustainable economic development through tourism, building a partnership and or collaboration? Would anyone care to take a shot at that? I know that we've talked about that as a board of directors to some degree, but give opportunity for anyone else to jump in there.
I'll take a shot at it. I'm definitely for working and partnering with tourism. When the Anpetu Wi, or the Sage Development Authority board, when we worked on our strategic planning, it was just amazing. Like I asked everyone to look out 7 generations or 500 years and just, what is your dream for us? What is your dream for Standing Rock? What do you want for your great grandchildren? And those discussions were amazing. And basically, one of the main things that came out of it was, we want to be like the renewable energy epicenter of, let's just say, the world. And that, to me, that goes along with tourism. If we want to, have all these new buildings that are green certified, and we are testing new wind energy and solar technologies, that partnership would need to go hand in hand. And another vision that we had was to, and one of the first things we would like to do once we start getting revenue from this project is to build a museum for us. And it's and that would be a partnership through our THPO office, basically because we need to remember where we came from. I start thinking about that. Yes, we always need to look forward those 7 generations, but we also need to remember where we came from and what our ancestors did for us. So we need to outreach into museums and bring our ancestors home. And a museum is a way of also teaching others about our culture, our identity, our spirituality. One thing, I'll just give an example. One of my Washichu, my Caucasian friends, had a daughter who was in a dance up in Bismarck, North Dakota. And when she finished her routine, I trilled for her. And I scared a lot of people. But my friend was very thankful because she understood what trilling means, and it's an honor for that individual. And she said, don't mind those people who stared at you, because you know what, you're teaching them and you're desensitizing them to our culture. So yeah, I think we need to, one of the lessons we learned from No Dapple too was we need to teach our ways, so to help people understand us. And understand where we're coming from. And I think a museum would be like just amazing, an amazing opportunity to do that for our people and for the world, really.
Thank you, Fawn. I appreciate that. And I'm happy you went there. I knew you were going to go there because, yeah, that's one of the larger components that we have for in our strategic plan is to build that museum/interpretive center. The more we show how we live in balance, with the earth, can prove those concepts. It's about living in balance with the earth and not leaving damage as like has been done for the last 400 years. We're in a place where there's the tipping points. We're blowing past tipping points, for wild animal species outnumbering domestic animal species, for jungles and plants, the carbon factoring. We're blowing past all these tipping points now, where there's going to be a hard time to come back. So for us as Lakota, it's living in that sense of balance and expressing that and showing that. And that museum, like you said, to bring our relatives home, to teach who we are to ourselves, our children, and the world, I think is really critical. Because my Uncle Isaac used to say this, Isaac Dog Eagle, he said, be a good Lakota, Lakota Washtea. Be a good Lakota. And that means being a good relative, not just to your own family, but to everything around you. There's a sense of respect and honor to everything that lives. And for us to be able to put something like that up, that's where not a lot, but a substantial amount of some of this revenue will go, because tourism brings a lot of things, but basically it's a chance to share who we are to the rest of the world, just like we're doing a little bit of it today. So, and I see a lot of things coming in right now, like a museum in Nova Scotia and Akwesasne Cultural Center, and this is being done in other places, and this is fantastic. Yep, the buffalo herd, Wolakota down at Rosebud, Redco, Much Wolves, they're putting it up, they're getting it done. And everybody's taking the lead in how they can. And, we got to be thankful for that. So what we can do here, is just what we can do. We're all playing a role in bringing our world back to balance. And I think that's where I'm honored to, even be in this space and visit with everybody, hear about these things. So thank you for that, Madam Chair. Can I keep my job? I'm just kidding. So we're coming up. We're coming up at the end of the hour here. I want to give an opportunity for Joe Smith. Joe, do you have anything to add in here on the project and the work that you've done as land ops, but also land ops plays a large part in what tribes can do, potentially, with the one resource that most tribes in this particular area, North and South Dakota, have, and that's land. Are there anything you'd like to talk about there, about that importance for tribes to utilize that potential and how to protect that? Or what are your views?
On this particular project here, and it's something that Fawn had started, was the Hearth Act regulations that allow the tribes to write their own leases on tribal lands. That'd be a big advantage here for us to, and further along on development of this wind farm, where the tribe will give a lease to Sage Development Authority. And something I learned here just recently is that there's not a whole lot of experience here in the Great Plains and on leases on a lot of land. So it's going to be a learning step for us, but we'll get it done. And some of the work we've done in the past with THPO, I had one of my staff members complete that training that THPO puts on, TCS training. So when they're out in the field, they're able to look and see and things on the projects that we do that are able to help THPO with identifying any of these sites on the ground. So we're a small office, 2 staff that are able to get out there and do some of that, but and it'll help, I think, in the long run for all of us learn what's out there and realize that, like Jeremy said, that a small percentage has been identified, but and in the work that I've done in the past, you may be driving over a site every day and not even know it. try to protect those. It's just because here's where the trails are, and people follow it, but it might have been something that was used in the past, and it's significant to them, so it's there, and it's just that need to be better aware of it.
So Joe, with the Hearth Act, what advantage does that give tribes now than they had previously when they acquire a Hearth Act? And how do you see that being facilitated in the future to really benefit tribes?
Well, they can write their own leases on the tribal lands that they own. So instead of having a lease approved by the BAA, tribal council approves that lease instead. So Hearth Act covers home sites, agriculture leases, business leases, and in our case, the wind and solar leases. We can write those ourselves. Uh, when in a conversation I had with an individual regarding development on tribal lands, the companies are seem to be reluctant to develop on trust lands because you know uh, not familiar with the process. I mean, the trust lands are just one more individual to Bureau of Indian Affairs to work with to get that completed. So uh, having those Hearth Act regulations, give the tribes the ability to accomplish that themselves. Still, it's a little bit for us to learn, but excited we'll get it done.
I think, as far as sovereignty goes, it's always pushing sovereignty, having more decision-making capacity and decision-making ability on your own lands is probably where a lot of that came from. So like our land operations department, part of what you do was taken from BIA, those roles, was it not? And what was the decision behind that? And how did our land operations come to be?
It was a 60-day contract, and the tribe provided those services instead of the BIA, and it's worked well. We had a little bit of learning to accomplish, which we did, and it's things that maybe a lot of tribes could do and should do to be more involved with managing the resources within their boundaries. So, and that's what that has done for us.
Yeah, you say that they should do. So when the tribe should do that, it's so that they have more capacity to do the management themselves and have more control and decision making over the lands instead of a governmental office having that level of oversight telling you what you can and can't do.
Right. And the Hearth Act regulations are one part of it, but also the Code of Federal Regulations related to grazing and ag leases. The tribe could write their own. There have been attempts in the past, but we can write our own regulations, and some of those that other tribes have done are a part of the CFR, and that's what they follow. It's something that potentially we could work on, and other tribes have done them already.
Yeah. You see something like that adding more cultural values and principles into the CFR for the tribe is why tribes would consider to do that.
Yep, they could. I think Navajo has their own. Zuni have their own regulations there that are really just a part of the CFR. So, and they're managed how they want it to be managed.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Joe, I know you have so much more to say. When you get comfortable on Zoom, you're gonna need a whole half hour yourself. Let's see. I got another question here? Do we consult with a Wichasha Wakan, especially when we talk about Tunkayata Kapaka? There is, I think, when we talk about this, the question is, do we consult with spiritual leaders in a sense about our project, and particularly with the land? And there's been a lot of, just for the audience out there, there's been a lot of forethought and prayer to this. Everyone that's involved with this, Fawn, myself, members of our board, and everyone who works on this is involved in a way. And I don't say this to be bragging in any way. I say this as Ikje Wichashelo, is that we all have a connection to this earth. We all have a connection to our land. We all have a connection to Unchimaka and Duawaka, that which is holy. And that helps us in this project. And we continually pray. I know that I do, continually pray that we're doing the best that we can so that we can take care of our people in the future. And that's what this project is for. We said initially that this is really a prayer. We named it Anpetu Wi, this project, as the first prayer of the new day. So that in that prayer, at that time, we pray for guidance, for strength, so that the darkness can be removed, that we can see the light and see things for the way that they are. And in these days, the way that things are that we need to take care of ourselves and find ways to bring in revenue, particularly here in the Dakotas. We, as a tribe, rely a lot on land lease and then also gaming revenue. And that's been hit, by the state operating pool tabs. They dwarf our revenue with pool tabs now. And we need to take care of our relatives here at home. And that's providing energy and bringing in resources so that we can build energy systems for homes outside of communities in ways that benefit our people's pocketbooks on a daily basis. And then also jobs, training, the ability to build more tourism like museums, education, the pathway from school to college for wind energy technicians, engineering, math, sciences, all that will be bolstered by this project so that our people, our children, can have career and life ways so that we build this balance further as we're talking about. We become that epicenter of renewable technology and or ways to produce energy and homes for our people to live and thus other people to live. So, that's all part and parcel as to why we do this. And a lot of thought and forethought has gone into this project. So I say that humbly, and I say that, just as a person doing his job, and I'm happy to be, in this position to do this job. Is there anything else that anybody's got any parting thoughts they'd like to talk about? Silence isn't golden, but I'll take that. I'll take that as a no. We're all good. So, Fawn, you got something?
Just anyone partaking today, if you need more information on our project, visit anpetuwi.com. I think there's also a link to us on the standingrock.org page. And both those pages, you can donate to the project, or you can donate to the continued No DAPL efforts of Standing Rock Sioux Tribe as well. So
thank you very much for that.
Thank you everyone for participating, all our other panelists, and thank you for everyone who's basically watching and asking questions of us. It's always a good thing to have full transparency. So thank everyone for attending.
Yep. And with that, how do we say it? Yapi. Peace out. A's. Mitako yase, everyone. You guys have a great day. Hope ilatanka. Ichichiapalo.